Welcome to On the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Coming up for discussion on our Viewpoints panel, a reality show ignites racial furor. Later on, we'll be talking about relationship issues. Stay tuned. And here are the issues we'll be presenting today to our Viewpoints panelists for commentary. The British reality show Celebrity Big Brother has ignited a racial furor. The Ontario Work for Diploma program doesn't make sense. And the bringing in of shelters for smokers at casinos have critics fuming. Later on, we'll be talking about relationship issues. But first, let's meet our Viewpoints panel. Shahid Akhtar is with the Canadian Association of Muslims and Jews, and Robert Metz is the president of the Freedom Party. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Now, we have a couple of pictures to show you, headline ones, headline news articles to show you concerning that reality show. Now, take a look at this first one. A lady. Now, she is a star in the Bollywood shows, and she's with this Celebrity Big Brother in Britain. Apparently, the other members of that reality show house have been caught on tape, name-calling, making fun of her accent, her food, the way she eats, and so forth. Now, little does she know that, there you go in that picture again, internationally, it has created a storm. Diplomats are now talking about it, and Britain is being accused by some as being a racist nation. Something, of course, the Prime Minister has said no. In fact, he has said outright he will not condone racism. But we've got both sides of an issue here. I'm going to start with you first. Akhtar, what do you think? Do you think this is a blatant case of racism, or, as the article points out, it may be a case of jealousy, because she has been highlighted as one of the House favorites?
Well, as a rule, Christine, if there is racism in any form, I don't try to dilute it by saying that this racism exists because of this, because they were trying to be in a show and it was all for... What actually disgusts me about shows like this, there was only one time I watched this show for about 5 minutes when I was flipping channels, and I couldn't take more than that, because I found that this was supposedly a reality show, but it defied reality. Reality was what they decided to make it to be. There was frivolousness, there was triviality about almost everything they did. And yet, it is one of the most watched shows. So, regardless of whether the comments were intended, not intended, it was just for show, the impact was definitely that they were taken as putting a member of one race down based on nothing else, but she had a different color of skin.
And even the name, they made fun of her name as well.
Country.
Yes.
Her name was different.
Shilpa Shetty, her name is, and they made fun of her name as well.
That's right. And behind that, all was for short term. Definitely there was a short term gain. That was that rating went up, the dollars went up. But it was not a short term gain which would be sustained, because the long term thing was that now, after this program, the face of those three women has become the face of United Kingdom. The British society is tainted by this. You mentioned the Prime Minister, the Exchequer, chairman of the Exchequer. They had to intervene in this thing. And I think that's the damage that shows like that do. I heard later that the sponsors have withdrawn that. So maybe there is always a bright side to almost every dark cloud. So maybe that is one message that goes out, that there's a limit to making these programs, just thinking that the lowest common denominator will be watching it with great interest.
Robert, what's your view here?
You know, reality shows, quote, which I'm the last guy in the world you should have on the show talking about reality shows, because I don't watch them. I actually watched one on request of a friend, and I found there wasn't anything real about it at all, especially when they started pushing little rubber duckies around out in the forest. I'm going, you won't find those in reality.
Well, let's hope not, but you might.
But I don't know if this is so much about racism as about just the general meanness you see on a lot of these shows. They're contests. Somebody's trying to win. There might be a prize at stake. So use anything you can to get past that person. And you're going to call them all sorts of names. If some of those names happen to cross racial boundaries or sex boundaries or whatever of the many prohibited, quote, you know, in various codes, type of discriminations. I don't know that it's always that. Sometimes it's just people being mean.
Do you think it was taken too far by diplomats? I mean, this reached back to India as well, where there are protests being seen.
Well, they're the ones who want to take it far. Oh, sure. They're the ones that benefit by it, and they're the ones that are exploiting
so you think it's
situation.
Overdone?
I think so. I think most of these things generally are. And I don't know if there's some other issue going on here. I can't speak without having actually seen it. I only know from what I read in the paper and all that kind of thing. But you know, Tony Blair comes out saying, well, we're going to oppose racism in all its forms. Well, does that mean they're going to stop subsidizing minority groups? Does that mean they're going to stop a lot of the legislation that they already do, which causes a lot of the competition that people compete for, you know, existing services because this group wants more than the other group? And I think that's what you see on reality shows a lot is groupthink, you know, like everybody's...
Shahid, do you think the fallout was exaggerated?
I don't know. I don't know. The thing is, it became a sexy issue. Because it involves
racism.
It involves racism. It's a buzzword, but in a way. And again, going back to looking at the bright side of it, I was very impressed that there were 15,000 complaints that were launched against this, with not only the producers of the show, but also with relevant human rights places and all that. And I think that is a good sign that people are aware, and they will not accept everything just because as an excuse that, hey, it's only a TV show. Which reminds me that if something like that happens in Canada, for example, you heard about that Windsor issue that's going on,
yes,
I would like to see the same kind of response from people, and not from Muslims alone, but from people almost every background that, look, do not promote hatred, because what these things do, they divide the society. They bring into the society an element which is so divisive, and it's so easy to promote hate. It just takes one burning sentence to do that, but then to repair it becomes a very hard thing. And I think the complaints and all that went in, chances are that people will think twice about promoting these kind of hate.
You wonder too if there are any rules to these particular games when it comes to low blows, so to speak. I mean, if a person is obese, are they going to be called every name in the book because of their size? Once again, there's a difference between a personal attack. I mean, you could say any attack is personal. This is an argument that can go on forever.
Well, that's the thing.
Like where do you draw the line here? Somebody says something silly, you make fun of them.
Stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Now,
and that was never true.
Well,
that was never true.
I think it is. It's not true in the
sense. Words hurt people psychologically, though, and it can have damaging effects on a person.
But still, it allows a person to walk away from a situation if there's no physical force involved. What that original statement means is sticks and stones will break my bones, but but names will not break my bones.
Well, it wouldn't harm me, it says.
In that sense, because it's the physical that is ultimately the threat that you face. If you don't like a certain group of people or they don't like you, in a free society you have a right to go separate ways. You don't have to like each other, but at the same time you have to respect each other.
And of course in the Big Brother house you can't go a separate way.
Yes,
that's why this girl is being reduced to tears.
I think your general thrust is correct, but believe me, words can hurt, because behind every physical hurt there's an idea which is articulated by words,
no question.
And then people act upon those things, and then they break your bones and hit you with stones.
Because once upon a time, even if you look at women abuse, it was seen as only physical. But then as society progressed, psychological abuse was also incorporated because it was recognized more as time went on, the psychological impact.
Because physical pain is actually a pain which you feel. It has to do with your emotions, with your feelings, which are not definitely, which cannot be seen, which is not visible. So words, feelings, which used to be called as lovey-dovey, touchy-feely things, they are very important.
But where it gets very dangerous is when people make comments that might hurt a second party, and they aren't aware of it, and it wasn't intended. And some people have been held responsible for that, even though it wasn't anywhere in their mind to hurt
How do you
anybody.
Resolve this in terms of, I mean, this is a reality show.
Well, this is a
it's
TV
meant to thrive
show,
on ratings. Do you see any follow-ups? Do you think anything could really be done
I think
to
the
calm that fear?
Sponsors will be the deciders. The money speaks louder than anything else in these shows. They're all about, in the end, it's all about the mighty and almighty dollar. And if they begin to see that sponsors are getting a little bit cautious and all that, that will teach them that civilization. But if money keeps pouring in, then regardless of what else goes on, chances are that they'll take it to even one notch below today's acceptance standards.
Okay, and it's time. Yes.
Sorry. And you know, it is a game. It has rules. And just like in a real fight, when you get into the ring, there's a rule, you know, that says, to those who consent, no injustice is done. Because if somebody knocks you out, even physically, it hurts in a ring, but you've consented to walk in there.
It does come down to what the rules are.
And that's what it's about, I think.
We're going to go for a break now. When we come back, Ontario's Work for Diploma program, we'll be talking about it. Stay tuned. Hello again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Now, the second issue we're talking about is the Work for Diploma program in Ontario. Now, what it says in a nutshell is that kids who drop out, they have the chance to earn certain credits in high school, up to 10, I believe. Now, the issue here is critics are saying this is not quite the way to do it, but proponents of it who've brought it in are saying it's a great way to help out kids be useful members of society who have dropped out of school. Both sides of an issue here. I'm going to start with you this time, Robert. What do you say? Do you think it's a good program?
Well, it depends on what you think education is there for. You know, when I was running for trustee in London, I remember the big statement and the slogan of the public school system was success for every student, which I later learned meant failure for none. Okay, and basically that's why we had so many graduates coming out at the top end where they should have.
You're insensitive for saying that.
Well, I know I am, but I don't like to see people turned out in the street dumber than when they went into the school.
You're not doing the person any favors, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
What about you, Shahid? What do you say?
No, I think that, again, you have to keep the purpose of almost every action that you take. And if the purpose is that there are some students who, for whatever reason, are out of the school system, and they are disengaged, if there is anything that can brought them either into the marketplace or into education system, we should do our best to try it. I'm not defending this particular program. What I'm defending is take an initiative, make some effort, try to see what is happening in other jurisdictions. There are apprenticeship programs almost in Europe, in Asia, in many countries, and they've been very successful. You do not have to necessarily dictate that you have only to go through one system. If the same objective can be achieved by trying a different alternative, then I think you owe it to those students to try. Otherwise, they will be on the street.
Frankly, I find the whole method they're using here absolutely embarrassing. I mean, here we are months ago talking about the state of the education system in Canada, and that there have been efforts toward trying to pull us up to par on a global level. And here you have students. And weigh the, okay, fine, I understand where they're standing. You've got these students weighed against students that are breaking their necks trying to keep up with the curriculum. And you hand out credits for a part-time program. I think it's absurd. Now, Rhonda Kimberly Young, who's the president of Ontario Secondary Teachers Federation, she came right out, and here's what she says. She says, teachers worry the province is allowing students to get credits for simply having a part-time job. Another concern she expresses is that it's devaluing the education system. Now, before I get deemed utmost cruel, I'm going to say there should be another program, perhaps one that allies people, like you say, with apprenticeships. Kids should never be discouraged, and they should never be left on their own to roam the streets, so to speak.
Regardless what your view are, you may have one.
What are these people thinking?
You may have one concept of success and all that, but if people fall through those cracks, then it is your obligation as a society to pick them up and see what is the best alternative under the circumstances.
Precisely,
To me, that's why I think we should have a completely private education system, right? The government should not be running education. It can finance it to a certain point, but not run it. It shouldn't be telling the teachers what the curriculum is. Exactly, and that's what the problem is. It's a prison in there. I remember high school, and even in the 70s, it was like a prison. Grade school was great, and college was great, but high school was just a wasteland. And it just wasn't productive. I remember spending days with teachers, kids sitting in the class completely depressed, and the teacher taking a day off. Okay, what's bothering you? Oh, we're locked in here like we're in a jail, and we don't feel like we're in a physics class. We don't even know why we're taking this or what use it has. And I remember I dropped out of school for a year or two before I took school seriously, and then when I had to pay,
a lot of kids
then
do.
I took school really seriously, and I did very well in college, much better than I did in high school, where I was forced to go and learn a lot of things I wasn't really that interested or didn't see a future in. And again, that's different from the primary age.
Do you think the real issue is being skirted here, that we have a third and a horrible rating, a 33% dropout rate in high schools? Do you think this is just sort of a way of trying to brush that under the carpet and get away
education system,
from the reality of it?
Not only that, I mean, the article that you have with you, it says this huge project will save 80 students out of the total province. I mean, before that was just pilot. Now with these 3 for extended schools, it will be used by only 80 people. Now I can assure you that there are thousands upon thousands of students.
Well, it says in this article that the government's aim is to have nearly 100,000 more students graduate from high school by the year 2010. But come on,
you can do that
is
by
it all
giving
about
away
numbers?
Graduate certificates.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, what are you doing to the system?
Exactly.
If you don't have any expectations for kids, they're not going to perform.
In your junk email, you must have seen many emails that offer you a master's degree for
$800.
You
get those a dime a dozen.
So you can, you know.
You even here, you too can be a Harvard graduate.
If the purpose is only to create graduates, then Robert is 100% right. Just give it away to them. The purpose is, what do you do with that graduation? If the purpose of graduation is, it trains you for, as you said, success in life. It trains you to deal with what the world is like. Then you have to try and think of other methods and alternatives.
You know, it strikes me too that if someone's above average, for example, they should go through the school system faster. They shouldn't have to still move at the same time as everybody. And that's why school is so much compared to prison, because it didn't really matter how well you did in terms of how long you were in there. Because, you know, if you were really brilliant and you were a physics genius, let's say, and you zoomed right through, why should you not graduate? Because that's what you've got. You've got that proof of knowledge, not proof that you put in so much time sitting in a chair listening to teachers all day about boring things. You know?
I guess the philosophy behind that is that to do justice to a genius. You don't want to end up doing injustice to other thousands of people who are not at that level.
It works all the way. It works on the other end, too.
In the marketplace, I think you talked about the privatized education and all that. In the marketplace, perhaps it would work, but in the marketplace, it can also create a multi-tiered system where chances are that people who are economically not as well off may actually end up suffering. And there are many other consequences.
Don't forget, I wasn't talking about the government not financially helping them. I talked about the government not setting curriculum, although it can set standards at a certain level if it wants, and any school that wants to follow that standard.
Robert, who pays the piper calls the tune.
That's right, and it should be the customer, the parent, the student. They should be directly the one responsible for paying. If they need assistance, the assistance should go to them, like indirectly, not to the school. It's the same way we run our healthcare system. We fund hospitals, but not sick people. Okay, so that's why we have such a shortage. I think it's completely misdirected that they go for the institution, because it's an institutionalized environment, and that's what teachers are mostly concerned with. They want to see their jobs protected, and quite often what you see in the schools is more about the teachers' union than it is about the curriculum. And I speak from experience, trust me.
Another area.
Well,
all by itself.
Did you win the trustee election or not?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Did well, though, and some other people in our group did win, because we ran a slate of people, which was unusual at that time. And they know me pretty well in the London area, both in the trustee area and in municipal politics. But nevertheless, the education system, we need one. We don't really have
there's
one.
a serious gap, because even if you look at the needs of the economy today, skills, trade workers, they're so needed. These same kids that they're encouraging here by giving them these arbitrary credits, why don't they create a system where they could be made use of, starting from the high school level, so that they end up being genuine part of the production cycle in society, as opposed to patting them on the head. Here's your 10 credits for doing whatever job in administration, and out you go with your 10 credits for God knows what.
I think the political will is against that. I mean, apprenticeship, as you mentioned earlier, that's sort of gone out the window. Unions don't like the idea of competitive labor, so they like the idea of keeping kids in school as long as possible. Because
and then when illegal workers take those positions, everybody gets mad.
Sure.
Anyway, we're going to go for a break now. While critics are fuming over, smoke shelters at the casinos, we'll be talking about it after the break. Stay tuned. Hello again and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. Well, shelter for smokers at casinos. There are furious people out there about it. Critics, as you can see on that article headline, they are upset because they're accusing the government of having a double standard of course, favoring the casinos, and we all know why. I'm going to start with you first there. What do you say, Shahid?
Well, what I say is that first thing, fuming on this. People will always fume, and it's a great pun. But at the same time, I think when you say double standard, as long as any law hurts other people but not you, that's okay. But the moment it begins to hurt you, it's not okay. It's again. We were talking about that show. It's about dollars. If the casinos are losing money, they have to figure out why they're losing money. There are casinos, actually 2 weeks ago.
Were you surprised they were losing money, by the way, from the article? Or did you?
No, I think it's understandable because last week we were in Las Vegas. And I was taken aback. Everybody was smoking inside the confined area. And there were places where my wife could not even just stay for more than 5 minutes. They get out of here. But I asked them, I said, why do you continue this? We're in all over North America. No confined space would allow. They said, if we do that, our business will cut into half in no time. So if it begins to hurt the dollar, the policies begin to change, new rationalizations come in, you begin to say, well, it's not really for food and drinks and all that, it is something else. But at the same time, if you see that a shelter with 2 walls and a roof, supposing that takes care of it, and you do make a law that will not require the employees to go, because employees are extremely important. You're duty bound to make sure that your employees are in a safe environment. There's no risk to their health, at least no required risk to their health. Give them, like Robert said about something else, let the marketplace decide. Sometime. The customers will decide if they want to go to that place or not. Don't bring government in every single thing that you do.
More and more.
Because, if we have value, one of the great Western value is free market. Yes. You allow the marketplace to take care of it. But the moment we see that marketplace is hurting the one little niche cause that we have, we start to turn against that and we say, no, marketplace is not a good thing. So in this case, give the choice to customers, give the choice to employees, give the choice to owners if they want to, but at the same time making sure it does not, the risk is not as big that you are requiring people to give up their life and health for earning
governments
that
have
money.
to protect, but
and you have to be consistent. You have to be consistent. If you are allowing this for casinos, then allow it for other places where food and
distinct double standard there. Robert, what do you say?
I think we're seeing 2 injustices here. One, this government monopoly on vice and gambling that they hold to themselves. Precisely. So they're making money off, which I don't even think they should be in that business.
And then there's the Smoke-Free Ontario Act that came into being in June.
That's right. And the whole concept of what we call the anti-smoking bylaws and laws across the province and country are a complete violation of private property rights. It doesn't matter what you think about smoking, it's still legal. What we're saying is that people who are engaged in this legal activity cannot go outside their home anywhere else and associate legally, even though they consent to go in there, even though employees may consent to go in there. I find it, I once suggested, well, if you're concerned about employees, getting secondhand smoke, maybe you should insist that they all be first-hand smokers. Why maybe only smokers should work there, and then what would you do? And that doesn't click on the bureaucracy. No, we still got to protect them from secondhand smoke. But nevertheless, it was obvious to me that the revenues were going to drop. It happened to so many restaurateurs. What I think is the tragedy in this is that instead of fighting for freedom, the people in the restaurant business are fighting for equal oppression. And that is, to me, the sad thing of it. I gave a presentation at Centennial Hall 4 years ago to about 1,000 restaurateurs who were just cheering me on, and I was saying, it's your right. If somebody else is telling you what you're going to do with that property, it's not yours anymore. The guy who owns it is the guy who controls it. Doesn't matter whether your name's on the deed or not. If the government's telling you who can come in the door, it's their store, right? right? And they all went, yay, yay, yay. But did any of them bother to do anything or put themselves on the line and say no to this law? No, they all thought they'd benefit at the expense of the other guy. So I say a pox on all their houses, in a sense.
You know, hypocrisy is glaring, though, when you look at the rest of the
Robert touched on, now I don't know whether you did it on purpose or it just came through, that can be another fuming debate, and that is making profit through the industry of through the vice industry.
Well,
now,
yes.
just not too long ago, gambling was such a vice. You know, you just couldn't do it. It was a sin. It was not allowed in the society. Then, because of the revenue that it could bring, the casino in Windsor, the casino in Niagara Falls and all that, they came along, and suddenly the vice is no longer a vice. Now, what is there to stop people from coming and saying, hey, look, why don't you make prostitution an industry? Let the government run it, give the license, as, by the way, is done in some other countries. Drugs will come into that. Liquor already is an industry, and liquor was also a great vice at one time. Now, what you do, you hold a glass of wine in your hand and you say, don't smoke. That is something which contradicts, and actually what it does, people begin to feel that you are not sincere.
Well,
you are
of
not
course
being
not.
honest.
You can't be sincere when you start demonstrating this type of behavior.
Exactly. So either...
Or even if it's the behavior you don't participate in, but disagree with, you still don't have a right to enforce your point.
And I think people will understand if you say, well, look, these things we are doing because money is very important. Well, then see if money is also important in other areas. And go with economy, go with jobs, and go with the society's standards of living and all that. People will understand that. But don't take a moral position for something behind which lurks the dollar sign.
Yes. Well said. And we're out of time for today.
Yeah, imagine that.
Shahid and Robert, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
We're going to go for a break now. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some serious relationship issues. Stay tuned.
It was in July, I think.
Pointing to you, I can be really good.
Go to air, we'll just look at the camera and say, people run. Run for your lives. The virus carrier.
The two of them. The two of them.
ground transportation provided by JP Motor Sales, located at 2320 Fairview Street in Burlington.
Hello again and welcome back to part 2 of On the Line. Now we're dealing with some serious issues regarding relationships. My guests, Mark Lang, who is a counselor with Bay Ridge Family Center, and Riza Ennis, who is a family mediator and counselor. Thank you both so much for joining me. Now our emphasis today is going to be on actually jealousy, internet dating, and in-laws. 3 very hot topics. In fact, every one of those can probably make up a subject matter for itself, can't it?
Absolutely.
Let's start with the internet dating. From what I understand, and that's, well, I was married decades ago, so this is kind of a little different for me.
Had marriage been invented then?
You answer. You would know.
I wouldn't.
You would know.
I'm only 23, so
23.
on the left and on the right.
The days of fossilization. No, it's interesting here because we're having a little demonstration here of finger pointing. Now, internet dating on a serious basis, is that really taking off today the way I've heard it is?
Well, I can tell you my clients share with me in great detail their journeys into internet dating as they go through separation and divorce. So it is taking off, as is everything else on the internet, and people accessing services on the internet. And you know, there's pros and cons. You're going to hear nightmares, and you are going to hear some success stories. I mean, to me though, I mean, the bigger question, obviously, the internet, like any other venue, it's a place where you start. What people really need to know and really are yearning to know is how to maintain relationships. You know, after that initial getting attracted to someone and finding out about somebody.
I would imagine too, though, that certain rules need to be followed, rules of extreme caution. Take, for example, you meet somebody the old-fashioned way before the internet. It's usually through somebody else you know. So there's a paper trail. Exactly, so to speak. But with the internet, I mean, you're looking at basically a phantom in the night. You don't know this person, you don't have any connections with them. You could be meeting with anybody.
I think also with internet dating is it also speaks to the notion of dissatisfaction with traditional ways that people have met other people. I don't think it's just necessarily that it's a new thing. I think it's also speaking to the fact that people are, you know, traditionally they would go find somebody in their a bar or, you know, in their church or possibly at work. And, you know, that maybe they've had some bad experiences. So they think, well, there's this. And I know a friend who tried it, and you know, she's married, or you know, it wasn't that bad of an experience, and what have I got to lose? The blunt reality of it is that you have a lot to lose with internet dating because you don't know who it is that you're meeting. There is an anonymity that the internet provides, and even though that prospective date puts up a picture and a bio, there is no verifiable evidence that what you're seeing and what you're reading is in fact true. There are other internet dating services that are there, and there's a cost involved, and it's a hefty cost, and their belief is that hopefully that will separate the riffraff out. You have to provide financial details and so on. And perhaps in those situations, that might be a better way of going about it.
Hopefully, but you do find psychos among the rich too, and that's the scary part. Is there any positive twist? Is there any positive twist to this that you could make of it? I mean, the caution is well received, and people need to understand this, particularly the young and maybe sometimes naive. But is there a positive twist? Both of you are counselors. Have you met people where they met each other on the internet and they did go away happily into the sunset?
I've met one couple who did meet on the internet, and they ended up getting married, and you know, they've been successfully, happily married. Now, both of them didn't know. This is the thing. Talking to them, both of them had the concerns that you were both talking about, so they were very cautious and went into it in a very cautious manner. But then, like I said, really used their own intuition and the hard work of relationship building, and so they made it work. So it goes way beyond. I agree with Mark. There's lots of risks about who you're going to meet, but like you said, I mean, you can go to a bar, you can have a very good friend who you trust who says this woman or this man is fabulous, and they can turn out not to be fabulous.
That's true too.
Because we don't know people. We don't, people don't disclose usually their dysfunctions, to their close friends all the time. We just don't know.
And the relationship's different between this is my friend versus this is my girlfriend or boyfriend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it seems to be, from what I understand and from what I hear, an emerging trend it's no longer taboo. It's accepted in the mainstream of society now, internet dating. Would the two of you say so? Or is there still a bit of a question mark and a skepticism among people?
I think that's good marketing. I don't think it's
You don't think
necessarily
it's
the truth. I do believe that people, there are a large number of people utilize the services. I mean, heck, they've got dating services for people who are married, who want to have affairs. I think that, certainly the danger of predators being there, but it's, as Risa has said, you can also meet that in the bar. The only benefit that I can think of in terms of internet dating is because of the anonymity, perhaps some of the initial discussions, people might pose questions because they're anonymous that they would not feel as comfortable posing face to face. And some of those questions might be tough questions.
But they can be answered truthfully,
right?
And you can then move on without hurting someone face to face to say, I don't think we should continue. So I agree that can cut out, for people who are really serious, candidates who you feel they're not going to be aligned with you.
When it comes to your personal choice from what you've seen, do you sort of look at it as how do the two of you feel about it? Is it something that the two of you would be comfortable with if you were in that sort of a situation where you were really on the lookout for somebody and you felt, well, my world is a little limited and I need it to be broadened?
Like for myself?
Would you feel okay with that? Yes. From a personal point of view?
No.
What about you?
It's not something I would do personally.
I wouldn't do it either.
No.
But it's just because of that tradition, or is it just something you don't trust in?
I'm also, a dinosaur, and he came before the internet.
What about you? Are you a dinosaur there, Mark?
I feel so young today.
I can tell.
I am so glad I'm in the company of dinosaurs, of course. To me, I guess as a therapist, I not only listen to people, I watch people.
Yes.
And what they say doesn't tell me a heck of a lot about them.
Sure.
I'm watching posture, phrasing, where their eyes are, things of this sort.
Excellent point. The words that are being said that actually are not spoken.
Right.
That's a good one.
So you miss all of that meta language, which, words really only
Which is
represent
reason
5%
to
of the
proceed
message.
with caution if you take that route.
Very much so. You're going to have to meet,
Yes.
Even on internet, but I personally would not do it.
We're going to go for a break now. When we come back, we're going to be talking, we may continue talking more about the internet dating, but I have something else in mind, in-laws. We'll be back after this. Stay tuned. again, and welcome back to our discussion about relationships. Mark Lang is a counselor with Bay Ridge Family Center, and Riza Ennis is a family mediator and counselor. Now, the two of you, in summary, the two of you personally, I asked you, and that's your personal belief. You're not too comfortable with the whole notion of internet dating, but something you said that really stands out for those of you who are, be cautious, because you really don't know who you're hooking up with. You may feel like you really know this person, but once you connect with this person, do it in a public place and take time to get to know the person. Because I can see somebody falling into that trap, feeling, well, I've been actually in communication with this person for over a year now. I know this person inside out, but no, it's better to take the time, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now we're going to move right along now to the issue of, wow, and that's not an easy one, in-laws. They used to say that the two biggest reasons for breakup was in-laws and money. Would the two of you agree with this still in 2007, or have you seen shifts a little bit?
I would not say that they are the biggest issues. They are often issues within issues.
What are the biggest issues, before we go on with that? What's the latest, in 2007, the biggest issues standing in the way of relationships today?
I would say one of the biggest issues is, your whole self-awareness. Mm-hmm. If you really have an honest, conscious awareness of who you are, and you've really worked through, which everyone has, their issues, family of origin, your marriage and the kind of healthy intimacy that can happen through that has a much better chance of developing into something really beautiful. So if you don't do your own work as a marital partner, as a parent, as anybody, it's setting the domino effect. There's just no way that it's going to work. So to me, I believe that the number one issue is you first. And we're not trained in our society, really. I mean, we're getting better, but we're not really trained. We don't train people necessarily to look at it that way. We're a very external society. There's a rite of passage. When you get to a certain age, you get married, you mate, you have children. And it's the emphasis is on what we have to do externally. We don't seem to have time or the inclination to look at ourselves and what we're offering and what we're bringing unconsciously to the relationship. When we center on that, we have a much better chance of keeping the marriage healthy and strong and productive.
Wow, well said, Mark.
It's the consumer society. Things out there will make me happy.
Everything's about me.
So, if you change, Christine, then our marriage will be a happier marriage.
So it's always the other person.
It's the other person, and yet, I've said in all the years that I've counseled marriages, I've never come across a bad marriage. And what I mean by that is, when you stop and think about marriage as for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and health, till death us do part, about forsaking all others, unconditional love, unconditional respect, tell me, what part of that is so terrible?
But what you're saying here ties into the whole in-law notion too, because I can't tell you, and we have to really move along quickly because time's running way faster than I thought. Many people get stuck in a trap when it comes to in-laws, that they feel they're standing in the middle, they're trying to satisfy the in-laws. Well, the person, okay, let's make the man the villain this time, okay? The man's trying to satisfy his family, and the woman is faced in the middle. Comments, Mark?
Well, you're wrong, but
That's not what you said before the show.
See, I think it's just an extension of what I said before. In a nutshell, the self-awareness is part of your whole self-esteem. Yes. When you have a healthy self-esteem, you're able to set respectful boundaries for yourself, your spouse, and your in-laws, and the extended families, and you're able to do it in ways that should not create any animosity, because it's done in a thoughtful way. And even if it does, then that's something for them to own. As long as you're accountable, that your boundaries are such where it really is respectful and it's in line with your values, then that's all we can enforce in life, and that's all we can control. So, but there's a way to do it. There's a skillful way. A person with good self-esteem will not antagonize their in-laws, and they won't have to they won't have to get aggressive.
But it's so much fun to antagonize.
I'm going to have to deal with Mark a little bit during the break. We'll be back after this. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our discussion about relationships here. Now that Mark is all straightened out, Mark, you had some really important things to say when it comes to the differences between males and females when it comes to dealing with their own parents.
There's a huge difference. You know, just from the very beginning, when a little baby is born, if she's a little girl, she's at mom's arm, she's swaddled, she's warm, she's been burped and fed and diapers changed. She looks up, she says, "You're a girl, I'm a girl." Everything is right. For a little boy, all that's true until he looks up and says, "You're a girl and I'm not." And so very early in life, he embarks on a journey to separate. But attachment and having the nurture of mom is still a very important issue for him to adopt, because it builds his sense of self-worthiness. But the same sense, he goes out to look, but what does it mean to be a male? And for many males, they derive their sense of being a man from mom. Sure. When this happens, and then they go into relationships in their marriage, they try to play both sides of the fence. They want to keep their wives happy, but they feel this great obligation to a mother who has, you know, kissed their boo-boos and rubbed their back and nurtured them wonderfully. And the wife feels very encroached. You know, 3 people in the marriage is just too much. She starts, you know, articulating that uncomfortability, and he feels caught between a rock and a hard place.
Not easy.
So for men who work through that and get to the other side, what I often hear is, wow, it's the first time in my life that I can honestly say I feel like an adult. I don't feel like I'm an adult with my wife, but still, you know, a baby or my mom's little boy. I feel like an adult with my wife, and I feel like I'm respected as an adult by my mother. And those are very important places to arrive. Without that, it creates fraction between and friction between the husband and wife, and they end up fighting. And not a good place to be.
What does the woman do? What does the woman do quickly when the husband wouldn't understand this, and he doesn't understand the dynamics of his own choices?
He doesn't.
And he continues going along that route against the wife. What does she do at that point, Riza?
Well, I mean, usually what happens is Mark says there's conflict, and you know, there's only so much you can do, and hopefully, I mean, it just depends how big the walls are and how much guilt and what family of origin issues are, as Mark says, for the man. But obviously, what I think any partner should do, because sometimes a woman will have issues too, you know, we have a responsibility. If we can't work it out ourselves, then we have to seek out skilled professional help to guide us through that personal growth that Mark's talking about to become an adult.
I think also, Christine, is that the issue, I mean, the types of themes that come up in a marriage that are problematic, you know, the money, the where we spend Christmas Eve, your parents, my parent, you know, sort of some of the typical things. But really what comes down to a lot of this is couples believe that they can talk to each other, because for the most part, conversations are without problem. But the real, what we call the crucial conversations, where the stakes are high, the emotions are strong, and the opinions may vary, those are the ones that don't happen, you know, all the time. But when they happen, they are the most, you know, passionately charged. What I see is that couples cannot engage in dialogue on these. They end up debating one another about who is more right and who is more wrong. And if you can't dialogue, I don't care what the theme is, you're not going to resolve it. You're just going to go, you know, as the Godfather says, you're just going to go to the mattresses. And I see this so frequently. You know, she'll come in, he doesn't listen to me, and he'll say, well, she, you know, she always nags me. And I know right off, communication is a huge, huge issue there.
Now, we're down to less than a minute. We didn't even deal with the area of jealousy, and I thought you guys had some great advice. Going into that huge topic is going to have to be left, unfortunately, for another date. I do apologize about that, because the two of you were excellent in your advice, and once again, thank you so much for joining me today, because we're out of time.
Pleasure.
On our next program, we'll be dealing with challenges facing women of Islam. I'm Christine Williams, and from all of us, thank you for watching.